Welcome to the Coach's Table podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What is going on, everybody? Wow, happy, what is today, Thursday? It's a Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. We're flying around. The weeks are moving. The days are just getting compiled, and everything's a blur for me right now, but that's okay. I'm super excited for the summer training that's about to happen here with all teams, and then for everybody that's getting out of school, get a little break and get a little vacation in before we hit the ground running, because in sports, we know that it doesn't stop. It literally doesn't stop. So, hey guys, for this episode, I am extremely excited because the world that we're going to kind of talk about here is it's brand new. And a lot of people are kind of asking the question of, what do I do with this data? How do I make sense of it? How do I present it to a coach or to athletes and get their buy-in with it? And this is going to be really fun and exciting because I think it's going to open us up and answer some questions that a lot of people are asking to themselves, to their friends. But before I introduce today's guest, who I think has a ton of value to bring you guys, just like every episode, if you get any value from this, if you get educated, if you get encouraged, if you get entertained, if you have a thought-provoking idea, something that you're like, I think somebody else can relate to this message or learn something, share this with a friend. That's all that we ask. Okay, if you're on Spotify, it takes 10 seconds to leave a review. It takes 10 seconds to put a post out and share it with a friend. If you're listening on YouTube, okay, it takes 10 seconds to hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And let us know what a great job that we did for you. It's a peer value exchange, guys. So if you get something from this, all I ask is you share with a friend. So today's guest has a tremendous amount of education, from TCU to consulting roles to a sports science role, and so much more than that. And we're really going to take a deep dive on sports science and everything else. So I'm super excited. Matt, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you today?
Man, I'm great. Flying around, but I'm on vacation currently. Yeah, I don't have the normal.
On vacay, dedicated. I appreciate you taking the time to have me on.
No, well, I appreciate you as well. I'm very excited to, connect with you and to hear kind of your thoughts as well. We were chatting a little bit, but you just got done with a seminar or some education with 1080 Sprint, which is awesome. How'd that go? What does that look like? Like, how much did you guys learn?
So the 1080 Summit, I always say that the 1080 Sprint has changed my career, not only making me a better coach, but as the 1080 Sprint is in more coaches' hands and whatnot, just my knowledge and ability to use that technology definitely levels me up, but I'm not the guy who cut the check for it like 5-6 years ago. So there's context, but
sure.
1080, they've had 6 or 7 summits, and this is their first in the States, as the US has just recently became their biggest market versus Europe. So there were 7 awesome speakers. There's the head US ski snowboard guy, Iowa basketball, Ola, who's with 1080, who's actually here this morning, Les Spellman, Stu McMillan, Cal Dietz, and Darcy Norman of U.S. men's soccer. So just fire speakers. But my favorite part, honestly, was just like the networking. There was about 70, 80 of us. And it was cool because it was exclusive to only 1080 users. So there was this language that we kind of already spoke. So it's just an awesome 3 days away. Just talking with like-minded people. So I'm glad to be back in Chicago. Though that altitude did not do me well.
It's crazy when you go to other places, and like if you go to the West Coast, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I feel like I'm out of breath. Like I feel like I'm completely out of breath. But it's great to meet everybody. So how did you get involved with 1080? I've seen them. I've personally never used them. I've seen them. I'm interested in the technology and what they have going on. But how did you kind of get involved with that?
Yeah, so at TC Boost, where I'm currently coaching, I was a part-time intern summer 2016, and then part-time summer 2017-18. Got my master's at TCU, and then I came back. COVID, I had these big plans, and then COVID said, think again. But I walk into TC Boost after like 2 years away.
Yeah.
And I was like, we have one of these now. Like I thought I only saw this on social media, and I thought, how on earth am I ever going to learn this thing, you know?
Mm.
And I literally just did like 3 workouts on my own. I was like, oh, okay, cool, not bad at all. So actually using it super easy, and then I think it's just a product of having very progressive and open-minded coworkers that have their own little fascinations. Whether it's a coworker of mine is a big broad jump guy. He just likes that exercise a lot. Another coworker is kind of like a basketball decel lateral kind of guy. And we
Mm-hmm.
all do kind of sprinting and speed, but to have a facility where I'm encouraged to experiment, mess around, learn, write articles, do podcasts, and do stuff like that also kind of promotes and accelerates this process. So to have a facility that not only has this tech, but the encouragement to learn and experiment, and then also share that with others, I couldn't ask for a better setup.
Yeah, and like I've been following you on social for a while now, years, and looking at what you guys have, from a tech standpoint, maybe the facility isn't the biggest or the nicest or whatever, but like if people follow you online, they'll be like, they pose a question like, what are you guys doing? Because you have the tech. I'm watching you coach. I'm watching you teach these athletes how to sprint. I'm watching you, use technology with them like real time. And I think that's such an advantage for the private sector where you can, maybe you only have 8 or 9 athletes at that particular moment, but you can hook them all up and like make it super individualized for them. And watching that from afar or digitally, from social, I think it's absolutely so cool and fascinating. And then to be surrounded by coworkers who support and encourage that and are also like, I'm going to do this route and be known in this component. And you're like, sweet, I'm doing this. And then you guys collaborate too. I mean, that is a sweet spot for growth, development. And then clearly it's shown because you're consistently putting articles out. You're consistently, showing your training, making improvements. And then obviously like you're doing a podcast as well. And then you get invited to do these other things. And it's just all of a sudden like, the network grows. And because you guys are pushing that needle, if you will, you're utilizing these things. I mean, that spot is just, it's gotta be just a massive blessing,
Yeah, for sure. So the private side has its pros and cons, but I
Yeah.
think courtesy to a lot of conversations with my mentor and a boss who invests in technology. We have jump mats, timing lasers, 1080 sprint, and gym aware. Like that
Yeah.
covers a lot
Yeah.
of it. But
Yeah.
we've also had 3-month trials with Nord boards. We've had 3-month trials with force plates, and it breaks my heart as a sports science coordinator to go through that process. I learn, I read research, I present staff education,
Yeah.
PowerPoints on how to use it, and then at the end of 3 months, it's like, I don't know if this money spent this way maximizes it, right?
Mm.
Just with the lack of consistent training, the younger athletes in general, 12 to 18 kind of being our sweet spot. It's like, are we going to drop, 3 to 5K on force plates for our combine guys? That's January to March, our
Yeah.
combine guys versus the other 9 months of the year, So we have had other tech, but the ones we use the crap out of every
Yeah.
day. Like the number of sprints and jumps we have entered in a team builder, I don't even know how many it is. But our process has become extremely efficient and streamlined, but also specific and applicable. Like very
Yeah.
simple insights, like with Charlie Francis's 95%.
Mm-hmm.
That athletes are only under that like 10, 11, 12% of the time. We know that
Wow.
92.5% for jumping is a similar percentage to 95 for sprinting.
Mm-hmm.
And then just with our individualization that we can get from our 1080 sprint, and being able to program our lifts with bar speeds as opposed to just percent 1 rep maxes, because we don't really get that heavy anyways. So, definitely maximizing what we have for the population we have has been a fun challenge. But to be at a facility with the staff like I have, there's plenty of things I could complain about.
Sure. Speaking of you guys' streamlined process, your guys' tech that you have, I'm a huge advocate for tech. I think, you need a couple of things really. And if you use those consistently and well, you can get so much, and it's the stuff that you mentioned. It's the timing gates, it's the VBT. And I'm a huge advocate of force decks only because I think it helps us see so much more insight. Now, in the private sector, like you're saying, I can see how it's different. In the collegiate sector, it's almost become a necessity. If we're talking daily readiness, if we're talking a bunch of other things, but I think, you can kind of get away with those main things. And if you use them on a daily, weekly basis, you can get a ton of information, a ton of data that you can find some kind of like correlations to. And then if you throw a health and wellness questionnaire on top of that, and then in the collegiate sector, like GPS units, if you kind of have all of that, I mean, you don't really need much more. And that's more than enough data for you to be consistently looking at anyways, especially if you're timing and testing and jumping, and then you got practice data. You can get, overwhelmed quickly just because there's so much data. But when you have that, I mean, you have all this stuff at your disposal to show improvement, to show readiness, or to, help facilitate recovery, which is essentially what all of it's attempting and trying to do for us.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head about it being very context dependent, Like in the private side, I almost call myself like a stimulus coach. It's like, how do I give my athlete the best workout for that day? Because the joke, and it's funny because it's true because it's not really a joke. If I see someone twice a week for 6 weeks, that's a lot. Kids coming in and out, and sport coaches, believe it or not, might not always know what they're doing. Just an extra hour of conditioning because they got mad or just whatever. Half my sessions turn into duct tape sessions, I call it, where they just come in all beat up, and I just gotta just make something happen. So, our tech is how do we get the best workout of today, and how do we use that for those small insights on tweaking kind of here and there, versus something in the college side where you know that you're going to have them 3 times a week for 14, 16 weeks at a time. Your goal or your question, because if we break down sports science into applying science to sport, and science is question, data, you know um, question, hypothesis, data, and then conclusion, and then rinse, repeat. Like, our questions are just completely different. So I feel like if you really know what your question is, and your tech aligns with that, then you can definitely do some really cool stuff.
Absolutely. And I think too, like the aspect of knowing the plan as well, like you guys kind of get blindsided in the private sector. Now, obviously, you can communicate with the athletes. How was practice? When's your next game? But it's difficult because you don't have the ability to potentially go walk into the coach's office and, hey, let's plan this out together. And, to that point, it makes it difficult. And so when you say in the question that you're asking, first, well, two questions. One, can you walk us kind of through your streamlined process that you talked about? And then two, can you kind of expand more upon when you say the question that we're asking, both in a private and a university setting from a sports science standpoint?
Yeah, so a typical workout. So speed and sprinting is kind of our thing. So a majority of my athletes, like, we don't even get in the weight room besides our jump work. Our high school groups do lift for 30 minutes because they train for an hour and a half. Um, but as you were saying, like, we can get qualitative data right away. So every time we start the warm up, I give them a fist bump. 1 out of 10, how are you feeling today? And of course, there's those athletes that say the same number every time, and I've heard -30, and I've heard 12,000 before. You know, so just a super simple way to check in. And what's funny is, like, is is their sprint and jump percentages line up kind of with how they're feeling, or if they say they're feeling really bad and they hit 93% of their best on a sprint, well, that's probably going to raise a little bit more of a red flag versus if they said that they were feeling really good, you know? Oh, it might have been a fluke, or they might have just, not been truly warmed up, versus I might just call it right then and there if they already said that they're not feeling the best, right? But then also there's days where I haven't seen an athlete in a little while, and they PR and they said, today won't be that good. I'm not feeling. it's been, a month, whatever. And I'm like, all right, cool. We'll just see what happens. And they PR. So it's not a perfect correlation, but it just kind of justifies that conversation or changes my like lens a little bit to be maybe like a little bit more aware. But we'll warm up, standard warm up. Not going to teach our listeners how to go through a warm up, but we'll always have some sort of measured jump, whether it's a vertical, a forward jump RSI, or a broad jump. Either bouncing back and forth between like a broad and a vert, or with an actual kind of med ball throw or something kind of like that. And I think ending with jumps is a great way to like really prime the body, finish the warm up, but also half start the workout, as well as get that first kind of or second kind of data point, first quantitative point. And then we train concurrently, so we do top speed acceleration and change of direction every day because of
Oh,
the inconsistency of our athlete's schedule. It's just different amounts. So day one is acceleration focus, day two top speed, day three long excel / change of direction. Um, so top speed, you have your mechanics and integration drills, and then if it's your top speed day, you got fly 10s, fly 15s. Acceleration, same thing. You got your drills and whatnot, and then a time to excel, and then change of direction, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very simple data points. And then, if it's an acceleration day, we're going to do our velocity decrement resisted sprints, where each kid has their own profile and their own resistance required for their velocity decrement. So basically, how much slower the resistance makes you. So the example I always give is you wouldn't have someone just put their own percent body weight on the bar because it doesn't take into account how strong they are, right? So velocity decrement is relative to their own speed. So if we're lifting and we're all going to be at 0.5 meters per second, well, we're all going to have different weights on the bar because we all have different levels of strength, right? So I could be at 20 kgs, and if you're stronger and faster, you're going to be at 24 kgs, but we're each at 50% velocity decrement, each at half of our own speed. And then we can get data on that as well if we're doing assisted sprinting, over speed on the 1080 sprint. And then that was kind of the first part of your question. How does that sound, and where do you want me to go next?
so when you're looking at answering questions or looking at questions from a sports science perspective, what question are you looking to answer in a private sector? And then what question are you looking to answer in a university team setting from that standpoint?
Sweet. Yeah. So private side is basically how do I maximize today? And maximize doesn't always mean do more. It's it's when do I turn it up and turn it down, right? So I've had plenty of athletes where they pop off their first, fly 10 and it's like a millisecond away from a PR. Well, I'm not going to waste any reps with drills. I'm just going to keep doing the flies, right? In general, like let's say a typical sprint workout over speed. So block 2 or block 3. So we already have a base. So let's say wicket over speed. We do it 3 times. So that's 6 reps plus 3 fly 10s. So probably like 9 top speed efforts max. Well, why would I waste some of those if they're already almost at their PR, right? Now, that doesn't mean I'm doing 9 fly 10s, but instead of doing 3, I might do 4 and maybe 5 at the most. But that's telling me that their body is ready to go and feeling really, really good. Versus on the flip side, I always say that there's nothing I have to do today. There's things I would like to do. If you're hitting 92% of your best, and I know that athletes are rarely under that, well then why on earth would I make you do more, right? So it's just how do I get the most out of today, turning it up or turning it down accordingly. Or to find out what's like a better drill, a better cue, a better kind of stimulus for that athlete, or also just for our training. For example, uh, contrast training is a thing, and we mess around with 10% velocity decrements paired with a laser, and you would think, oh, 10% is so light, like nothing's going to happen, and they popped off their best lasers of the of that training block, right? Because it's heavy enough to feel something, but it's not too heavy to where it changes their form, right? If anyone does a heavy sprint and then you go sprint regular, you fall over, right? So 10% is that load where you feel it, but it doesn't change the rhythm. And that's something that we wouldn't have really found otherwise. So there's decisions that we have, whether it's cutoffs, whether it's better pairings of exercises, because we have simple measures, but we also have specific measures. So that's how I would kind of summarize the private side. Now, on the college side, I still consult for TCU Beach Volleyball, Go Frogs.
Yeah.
Super awesome season. I'm sure your listeners are deep in the college beach volleyball world. Um,
If they're not, that's a fault on them because beach
oh,
volleyball is electric and TCU's amazing. So
dude, I'm so blessed that I just like got in. That's a whole different story. But if you have a local kind of college beach tournament near you, like go. Um, but knowing that we have consistency and we have weeks to do this stuff, it's more um, manipulating training to prep them for certain kind of phases in training. So load monitoring, if I had to kind of sum it up. So um, I can't give too many specifics, but for example, I heard this quote that I really liked where it's this guy was talking about doing catapult in sports science for a high school football team, and he said, "I'm not the takeaway coach. Everyone thinks load monitoring, do less, do less, do less," which like, well, probably that is the case, but he's like, I'm the move around coach, right? If you have your 15 drills, you're going to do 3 drills 5 days a week. Well, how do we just move them around and make a high-low model, for example, right? Or if the team is really beat up and we know that we have matches on the weekend, well, how do we just move stuff around and make the most sense? So college is more, how do I maximize the day, the week, and the consequent semester um, for what we know is important, and that's fall matches in season in the spring and stuff like that.
right. Yeah. When I'm looking at it from a collegiate perspective, I completely agree with what you just said. More of a move around and more of a how can we get you recovered and provide you with these A stimuli that we need to get your performance. And so if that means, we cut things in the weight room, cool. If that means we sprint more prior to practice, cool, because maybe we didn't touch it, right? That means we need to do intensive jumps, right? Cool, let's do that, right? It's um facilitate them for their performance of that sport. Now I just use tech and data to help me know and understand who and what they need for that particular day, week, month, whatever the case may be, and then plan it out with a coach. You know what I'm saying? And so what affords us a great opportunity with GPS units is we can start to classify drills at practice by muscular fatigue, central nervous system fatigue, or just seeing like what causes higher heart rate, what causes them to work harder, et cetera, from that standpoint. And so when we do that, we can start to provide that to them. This may take years to do. So let's recognize that it's not just I watched practice one time or we got one understanding. This is like over, 2, 3 years worth of data that you can start to say, these drills look pretty similar. These drills look pretty similar. And then you can start to, what you said, adjust, but lay out the practice session accordingly over the week, the month, and say, hey, like, coach, if we're a little fatigued on this game, are you okay with that? And he goes, yep, okay, cool, right? Because I'm going to push him because we need it, right? Or, hey, like, I'm going to back off because we need to be feeling good. But you can also get that, the subjective wellness questionnaires and stuff from the athletes, which I think plays a huge role into that. But the tech just provides us with the data to essentially, what I like about it, it's all objective. I have no personal bias in it. And I think that's what I love about the tech so much, because we can look at something and say, well, I think that's challenging. But just like you said, what's challenging to you and what's challenging to me could be different. Just like if we're at 50 or 0.50 meters per second, your load and my load are different, right? But what the data allows us to do is take a little bit deeper inside look and say, my bias is removed. And I'm just using the objective data to maybe make a case in point, but just to understand too, right?
Yeah, so I think you totally hit it on the head where it just adds that objectivity to it. Like my boss was in business for 20 plus years doing speed development before he had a 1080. And the TCU beach coaches were successful before, they
Yeah.
started just tolerating my rants about sports science on a weekly basis. But, it just answers, are we actually doing what we say we're doing, right? If we say that Charlie Francis's 95% is a high intensity speed stimulus, well, are we actually hitting that, right? If we
Mm-hmm.
say it's a deload week, well, did we actually deload? So,
Right.
although you can tell, and I do believe that like the coach's eye and intuition and stuff like that is obviously way more powerful. It's why coaches have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it just supports what you're doing,
Yep.
that's still valuable. So just answering you have to have your question and then say, are we actually doing that? And then like, how does that turn into a feed forward loop of this question? Here's my intuition. What does the data say? And then it kind of just keeps going from there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you get two things in what you just said. One of them, the feed forward loop, right? To answer what we are currently doing and ensuring we are doing what we have planned or believe we said we're doing. And then you get the instant feedback loop that is right then and there, that training session of if I'm doing, 0.7 to 0.8 meters per second, did I do that on that rep or not? And you're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. But, if you're at, 85, 90% consistently of that velocity zone, you could be seeing positive adaptations. And then you can do other things to test that. And I think a lot of people have done enough with like a velocity-based training to show like, 16 weeks of sub-max and you just ride the wave there, right? And you just go different zones and then back up. Like a lot of people have seen continued success with that. And it just makes for good quality training. And it just shows you like, maybe you don't need to rotate everything as much as what you think. Maybe running those 3 weeks, those 4 week blocks, is what you need. And just, that's what we call good, consistent training, and you're just seeing positive adaptations, and that's what you want because you're getting that objective feedback from, the tech in itself. So kind of switching gears though, you kind of play a consulting role, or you have in the past and maybe a little bit more now. How did you get into that? And what have you kind of learned through that process?
So consulting with TCU Beach, that started just because I was there, and that's where a lot of this stuff starts. Zooms and phone calls are great, but just being able to shake someone's hand and just spend time with them exponentially expedites that process.
Yep.
So I was doing stuff for a few other kind of TCU teams, and I had class with the GA strength coach, and for whatever reason, I was like, hey, I could probably do another team if you want. And then they were like, sure, I'll talk to the coaches. And then the next day, they're like, yeah, me, you, the coaches, and your boss are going to meet, so super grateful. What came over me to offer that, but then also for them to take me up, no complaints over here. And then just keeping that relationship going where obviously being able to provide value is a little bit more challenging being afar.
Yep.
And that's also me changing my expectations of what I can and can't do. There's things obviously being live versus just being remote, being 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
But consequently being a little bit more creative with my efforts, because you can't just rely on the data, because I don't have those opportunities to have those little side conversations and whatnot, to do more than just the quote unquote sports science. Or for example, I'm helping out one of our ex-interns who's now a D2 college strength coach with some of his speed programming and stuff, where I spent a whole summer with him, just having chalk talk after chalk talk, and we kind of clicked and stuff like that. But if people want to pursue consulting, that I'm also trying to continue doing is just Instagram, I never thought I'd be this guy, but I'm a Chat GPT guy. Please don't roll your eyes, listener, but like literally I said, give me a list in a table of all of the D3 schools organized by name, conference location, and links to their staff directories.
Wow, look at that.
All of that out. And then you click on the staff directory. If they have a strength coach, you find them on Instagram, shoot them a message. If they don't, you hit up all of the assistants because they're probably more likely to respond than the head coaches. And it's also way easier in than trying to go to the head coach first. So you hit up an assistant on Instagram and say, just try to get them to respond. Short little message, copy paste, admittedly. And then you kind of just go from there. Now, not saying that that's the most successful, but if the success percent is 10, well, are you willing to send 100 messages? Are you willing to send 200? If it's a 5% success rate. So just being creative, but there's so many ways. Like, I would never give out my phone number, but you can hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and all these things will make my phone buzz, So I think to say like these people aren't accessible is a lie. It's just being creative and putting in that sweat equity. And also it's tough navigating those phone calls, right? How am I organic and authentic, but I am trying to help you out and I am trying to have you pay me money, right?
Yeah.
So it's navigating that phone call. Well, do you try to close it on the first phone call, the second? If they're close, you just go try to visit with them. Do you offer them something for free? But I think if I had to sum up, kind of change this convo a little bit, is truly understanding their problem. The amount of people as we try to get some indoor GPS for our combine training this last season, I got on Zoom with like 3 different companies, and all of them without fail, within 5 minutes, they'd pulled up their like 40 slide PowerPoint about their technology.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I want your tech. That's why we're here. Like, I don't care. Like,
I'm clearly interested. Yeah.
So whether it's understanding that a lot of that stuff is a long-term play, like how many people would you give $1,000 to write workouts for the summer if you just chat with them for 30 minutes on the phone? Probably not that many, So being creative, being patient, being willing to go through multiple iterations of your process. Like I hate when I find a better way to phrase that first message. I'm like, oh, I just wasted those 20 people with my bad message. It's like, well, it's part of the process.
Yeah.
But if I had to summarize, it's being creative and finding people, being patient, but then also really just understanding, like I've talked to strength coaches. They have plenty of space. They have a big staff, and they already have a decent speed training kind of system down. And it's not that I can't provide value, but within the first 30 minutes, I'll just have to fact find more, versus if all they do is complain about budget, well, then maybe it is writing a free workout for a summer and kind of going from there, So it's being creative, like not going into it with a preconceived, this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm doing. And maybe it is a free summer of workouts, and then they're like, oh, wait, this stuff works, which I hope it would. Oh, this stuff is great. Like I think it's definitely worth paying. So being creative, thinking outside the box, and just putting in that sweat equity.
Absolutely. And like, I think to that too, I mean, there's so many, we struggle from the business side. Like I say this all the time. So as coaches, we need to be a business, man or woman, right? So we need to be a business, man, like you are a business. Okay. And then you need to be a businessman, like ensure that you are, continuing to get yourself paid, ensuring that you have skill sets that people are willing to pay for, right? And that means separating yourself from the marketplace. That means doing all these other things. But to that point, that also means sending messages, knocking on doors, shaking hands, and meeting with people and saying, hey, like, I have these skill sets. I really enjoy doing them. I recognize that you have that problem, or you don't have somebody that has that skill set, at least not to the degree of me, or at least you don't have it at all. Do you think that could be beneficial? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, let's figure out a way together. And a lot of times, you're right. It starts with that free 99 price point for you. It starts with here's a portfolio of what I've done. Here's what I could do for you. Here's, if it's a free thing, if it's a summer workout program, whatever the case may be. But it's having that conversation to get your foot in the door, and to kind of have the guts, if you will, to just reach out and say, hey, I have these skills, and you may be understaffed, you may be whatever the case may be, and let's figure out how we can do this together, and go from there. And that's, more coaches really need to do that, if I'm being honest with you. And it's no different than, Matt, you reaching out to people to do a podcast. It's no different than me reaching out to people to do a podcast. Hey, I have this thing. I'm very interested in what you're doing. Would you like to do it? Like, a lot of times it's that simple. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing from a business standpoint. And now all you're doing is tying a monetary value to it. Hey, this is what I charge. Like, I believe this is what I'm worth. I believe this is what the services that I'm worth are. You know, I mean, I'd love to help you, but at the same time, like, there comes a point where you've done it long enough and you deserve to get paid, just like everybody. Like, no different. And so, you know, if you're listening and you're like, I don't know what to do, or I'm nervous, I'm scared. So many coaches are like, I don't want to put myself out on social. And it's just like, you know what? You should do that. You should do that. I had a friend reach out that is like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a t-shirt company. I'm like, go all in, do it. Like, just do it. And because the only way you're going to learn is by doing it. Just like you said, the only way you're going to learn, like, dang, I could have proposed it better. I burned him on 20, but now the next 40 are going to be great. And I have a higher percentage. And it's like, if you get 10 yeses, let's just throw a number out there. If you get 10 yeses, right? And it's $2,000 a pop, $5,000 a pop, whatever. Like, that's good money you just made there, you know? And you're seeing more and more coaches make more and more money online because they're willing to put themselves out there. They have a good product. They're good people. And people are like, I will pay you for that. And there's zero issue with that at all. And it should be encouraged. It should be supported. And it should be happening more often.
Yeah, I think especially with tech nowadays and how literally just, I mean, for an entire academic calendar, like, I can log into 3 different databases and pull data and put it all together and then hop on Zoom and talk face to face about all this stuff, you know? So whether it's something more complex like that or something as simple as writing workouts and hopping on Zoom every other week just to ask about how it's going, you know?
Yeah.
But it's uncomfortable, you know, like I admittedly, I'm bad at being bad at stuff. So I hate realizing that my messages weren't the best, or I hop off the phone and I'm like, where did that go wrong? It's my fault, but like, where did that go wrong? You know? Or following up with my mentor and kind of going through the phone call. And then he's like, oh, well, you could have done X, Y, Z. I'm like, oh my God, you know, like, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's a sucky feeling, but you know, if that's what you want to do, whether it's build that portfolio, whether it's have more stories for podcasts like this, or whether it's just to get your bag, you know, like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows for sure.
Well, and to that point though, right? So there's what we're talking about is the skill set, right? Wow, I feel like I just sound like a New York accent there. And I hate New York accents. I hate New York accents so much. But what we're talking about is a skill. Like, we're talking about skill sets. We're talking about, one, the skill of sales, obviously, the skill of, you know, knowing the sports science, writing the programming, the skill of communication, right? The skill of, you could say, marketing and copywriting, and all of those skills. If people don't know and understand, those skills in the real world, in the business world, are the skills that get people paid, and paid a lot of money. And we get so, I love strength and conditioning probably as much as the next person. We get so wrapped up in our bubble thinking that it is the end all be all. But there's skill sets that actually make way more money that we should be taught and educated on. And if not, the onus is on you to go learn them and read about them and talk to people about them. But those are the skills that get paid, like, and they get paid really well. And if you are struggling and you're trying, like myself and Matt and everybody else, keep going, right? But understand that those are all skills, and it's going to take reps. Just like you tell your athletes, it's going to take reps to get faster and stronger and jumping higher and all that stuff. So it's like, we can focus on this other stuff too, and I agree with that. But I don't think we should neglect the business acuity component of things. Setting up a simple website, email marketing, getting email, all that stuff is stuff that we should be doing continuously to get your bag, to make more connections, to help other people, right? And to service other universities, private sector, whatever the case may be. but understand it's going to be tough, uncomfortable at times, but it's worth it. Like it really is. You
You
know?
telling me that I have to listen to my own advice?
Yeah. I hate it as much as the next person. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy though, because like the thing that the thing that I don't like is like you see people that bring people down and they try and do something, right? Like, oh, like you should only focus on strength and conditioning. Like, okay, but like you're telling me I need to prevent myself from taking care of my family because you think I don't need to be posting online? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that, you know? Or they tear people down. It's just like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, you know?
It's because they wish that they had the willingness to put themselves out there, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, takes trial and error. That's what it does. It takes guts, trial and error, and takes time too. Like that's the hard thing. It's because for you, how long did it take you? Like to, I mean, your first consulting one, was probably different than most people's. But if you were to go through the process again, how long? What does the process look like, lead time wise, to say, hey, if I'm going to do another consulting gig, what does that look like? I mean, how long are you actually in communications before you're officially hired?
Yeah, I think it can take like years potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like my boss, so through TC Boost, kind of my boss and I both work with Northwestern football.
Yeah.
Now that was he used to be the head football guy for 10 years. And then he's had this business for 20 and he's known those guys for a while. So it's like there's these things that you can't just put a time point on, but
Yeah.
For example, if I had to talk through like strength coaches that I've recently had phone calls with, went pretty well, and it was just saying hello, and they said, oh, like maybe you can zoom in to our exercise science 101 this fall as like a guest speaker, right? Well, am I willing to have a few casual text conversations throughout the summer, right? Am I willing to hop in on Zoom, right, once or twice with the class? Am I willing to, go through maybe a free fall semester worth of workouts? Are you willing to, that's 7 months plus being intentional about texting people, intentional about hopping on Zoom, plus putting a workout together to then get that check,
Right.
So it's I would say it's more of a time point thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to give a piece of advice that definitely blew my mind, is I was talking to my mentor and I was like, how do I make it feel less robotic? It's just like whenever I hop on the phone with these people for the second, third time, it just feels so like professional. But I don't want it to feel professional. I want it to feel like not best friends, but like friends. It's casual. It's not just like me interviewing them and da. He's like, well, when you guys text, what do you text about? I'm like, hopping on the phone.
Business.
So it's like every time they see my name on their phone, it's just like, hey, when are you free?
Yes.
So as soon as I think of someone, whether it's as something like an athlete had something that we talked about, or a topic came up in a staff meeting, I just text them right then and there. And maybe it's a 3 text back and forth. But even just like there's this hockey guy that I know, and my boss took our 1080 out to a local guy that we test his guys. So I just said, hey, thought about you. My boss just took our 1080 on ice. How's that going for you? It wasn't it didn't turn into a phone call. We just exchanged like 4 texts.
Yep.
But imagine how much more organic that next phone call is going to feel if that happens like 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Yep.
And maybe, going back to people not understanding their problem, or like as a consultant, I have to understand their problem first. Well, maybe it takes a semester of pulled hamstrings, a semester of saying our athletes are slow. Oh, wait, that guy we talked about, in May. It's now October. Maybe we should give him a call. So it's like you can't quantify it. Yep. But just like how you have to get in people's algorithms on social media, right? You have to post consistently. You got to stay in the back of their mind at least. and one text every 6 months isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's following them on social media, and then maybe you get in their algorithm, and then you text them when, if I'm trying to work with, let's say, a college baseball team,
Sure.
I'm going to stay up to date with, I have a list of everyone I talk to, when I talk to them, whatever. And let's say that if it's a baseball team, they have their fall scrimmage. Well, I'm going to put a reminder in my phone. Hey, this college's fall scrimmage. Text them. Hey, awesome game. I saw it went into extras. Quote unquote. Like how much farther does that go? Infinitely. So it sucks, just as I would love to quantify that as we started this combo out with sports science. It's just like training. It's good exposures over time, and there's plateaus along the process, but just keep the touch points frequent and casual. And hopefully that little rant makes sense.
No, it's if you guys are listening and you aren't good at networking, you aren't good at connecting, literally go back, listen to everything you just talked about and apply it. That is very applicable and actionable items that you can do to help you grow your connections, not only with, I don't know him, I want to connect with him, but to grow your current connections as well. And it may not always be like, you may not text them back and forth every day if you're best, like you would your best friends, but it's maybe once a month. Maybe it's once every 2 months, whatever your cadence you feel is appropriate, right? And put that in your phone. I was just going to say that when he said that, like I put a reminder in my phone to reach back out. Maybe it's within a month, maybe it's whatever the case may be, because then I don't have to store the mental brain process and power to, I haven't talked to so-and-so, right? And then I just get a reminder and then I reach out to them. Hey, what's up? How you doing? How's everything going? Hey, just want to give you a heads up, whatever the case may be. And it keeps that relationship. I look at it as planting seeds like a farmer, right? Like a farmer plants seeds and then they have to water it. They have to water it. They have to water it before it grows, right? It's the same thing. So you planted the seed with the initial connection and now you're watering it, right? Every time you reach out, you're watering it. To your point of, instead of always saying, when are you free? Can we get on the phone? Right? Because you're then like always, like asking. And hey, let's just put stuff out. Hey, I saw this. Congratulations. Yeah. Great season. How's the off season going? I saw your athlete, blah, blah, blah. Because now when they call, it's, hey, Matt, what's up? And you're like, hey, what's going on? And now you can be like, actually, here's what I really wanted to talk to you about, right? And then they feel more open and willing to be like, let's do that because you're a good dude with good intentions, doing the right thing, rather than, not saying you are, but rather than people feeling like he's just always trying to sell and close,
Yeah. I think feel is huge. Like I would hop on the phone for the second and third time and it just feels different, right? Like I have phone calls that last 30 minutes versus lasting 3 hours.
Yes.
And it just, I don't have those 3 hour ones like back to back to back to back. It just changes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why does it feel so professional? It's like, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
You know? And how do you make it feel like you care? How do you make it feel like you're not just trying to sell? Well, you talk to them like you're not just trying to sell. It sounds so simple. I think like being intentional about that, like,
yes,
like if someone says like, oh, that's not really in our budget, then don't ask them again. That doesn't mean be like, all right, deuces, like you provide no value to me,
right?
But okay, well they said this, well I can still, like, hey, like send me a video of one of your athletes sprinting, whatever. Like,
sure.
There's so many ways that it can look, but it's just being creative and like being intentional. But I think that the casual text goes a super, super long way.
Yeah, and I also think going in there with no expectation, right? Like if you go in there like, we're going to make a deal, it's very difficult at times, right? But if you go in there like, hey, look, I just want to help any way that I can. And, if you want me to help, that's amazing. I would love to do so. This is the price. You can look at it as like, oh, it's just not in the budget. Like, oh, let's overcome that objection. Because in universities, let's be honest, there's money everywhere. It's just a matter of people finding it, right? But they have to find the value in order to find it, right? And so it's just navigating that process. How do you overcome objections? How do you overcome, and like you said, it's not going to happen on the first conversation. It's not. And it's, it's a territory that hasn't been charted frequently. It's becoming more and more, but some universities are not, they haven't ever done that before. So to them, it's brand new, right? And so you have to know, learn, and understand that process of things as well, because if they've already done it before, typically it happens pretty fast. If they've never done it before, you feel like you're always trying to throw a sales pitch because you're like, hey, look, like this is valuable, and they're just kind of like, I don't know yet, maybe,
Yeah, it's them understanding, and maybe it is a few phone calls and you asking some tough questions.
Yes.
Not in like a rude way, being like, like it has to come up naturally, but for example, you said like the first phone call is not to get the close, and maybe it does work out like that, but that's going to be less so the case, on a smaller percentage. But like, it's going into it saying like, and I've literally written this out before, and it changes it a lot. It's like purpose. How do I want this to feel and go? Purpose, like fact find, say hello, and the purpose is just to like open the line of communication, right? The purpose is not to get the close, right? It's like, how do I want this to go? And it's like general to specific. It's like, their story, how they got there, and then next I kind of want to talk about what they're currently doing for training, and then I'm trying to get to the problem / a potential solution, right? Even just having that casual game plan going into it, and you should be taking notes anyways.
Of course.
Just I take pride in being able to wing things, whether it's a phone call or a podcast.
Me too. Me too.
But just like writing that out, I think goes so far, and then consequently, it also will help you out in the future. So like, you can say, if they have like hamstring issues, then you can follow back up. Be like, hey, coach, I see we're halfway through the fall. Hopefully your team is a little less banged up. How's the soft tissue stuff going? Like, oh man, it hasn't gotten better yet. Hey, can we talk about that? It's like,
yeah. Or you ask the question too of like, well, what are you doing to make it better?
Exactly. And maybe that they're not doing anything, but you have to let them sit in that for a second. It's awkward. It's awkward. But it's two different things to be like, I know that you guys can be doing better stuff, versus like, do you believe in what you're doing for your hamstring stuff? And just let them kind of think about it, right?
Yeah. It's like having them. I kind of, an example, if you will, maybe it's like in a relationship with somebody and you want them to change something. They need to come to the realization that what they're doing is not working, right? Very similar to you, just in a professional setting. They need to come to the realization that like, we have a problem, we can't solve it, and we're not happy with where we currently are. But it's uncovering, helping them discover and uncover that together. And then you go, hey, I'm your solution. Like, I'm your solution. So let's make this work, right?
Yeah. So, but learning how to do that tactfully, and it's a skill, and it sucks how many phone calls I've had that going back I would have done better. And I'm sure in a year I'll be like, oh, well, I could have done those phone calls better. So going back to one of the original thoughts, why people don't do it is it's vulnerable. Like to put your value in the service that you can provide, and then someone goes, no, I don't see it.
Yep.
It sucks, but I think consulting is a good way to, like, for example, if I want to get back to the college side, well, besides going and doing an unpaid thing, well, how else can I get some college stories, right? Some college anecdotes, some real experience and results. Well, consulting is a great way to do that, and also get paid for it. So I think consulting is definitely an underutilized kind of territory. But it takes a lot of work up front, and you don't always see the return right away.
Correct. Well, and you have to prove it too. I think if we're staying on consultant, then I think we'll come back to the sports science stuff. But you have to show, whether it's for free, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's Instagram, Reels, Shorts, whatever the case may be, that you're that guy, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, if you're a sports science guy, like, show them the tips and the tricks and essentially give your best stuff out for free, right? But show them that. So then if they go on your page, because that's what we're all going to do, let's be very honest, is we're going to go check everybody out on social and or LinkedIn or whatever else. And if we see, like, I got tremendous value just from his Instagram page, his Twitter page, his YouTube page. He's got an email newsletter. Like, what is he going to tell me on there? And then you have the social proof to show that. It enhances your probability of them saying yes to you. Because if you have zero social footprint, right, and you go, I can do all this for you, a lot of people are going to be a little bit more skeptical, right? But if you have a good social footprint and they see it and people share it and they engage with it and everything from that standpoint, they see, like, okay, like, here you go. Now I get that there's people only show the best stuff on social media, and I get that. Now I understand that. So you have to be wary of that. However, if you're a real authentic individual doing what you believe to be good things, then, put it out there. It's not difficult, I mean, it's hard, but it's not difficult,
I got this feedback a few times of recent, actually, just people reaching out on, like, Instagram, and they were like, I just like the vibe of your page.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I guess that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's an analogy that I say, like, let's say you are interviewing for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Interviewer fumbled the bag and was like, hey, there's this guy coming in 5 minutes for an interview. Here's his Instagram really quick. And the whole staff just, like, scrolled through your IG for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what would you want them to say? Or, like, what vibe would you want them to get? Or if they had to summarize it in a few sentences, what would you, like, want them to say?
Yeah.
Because that's more or less what, like, IG is. I'm on this podcast, and then your followers get the link to Coach Big Toe.
Yep.
And then they click on it and they scroll, and then they have to decide, like, oh, this stuff's cool or this stuff's not,
Yep.
Or, that's what happened. I was on Science for Sport podcast. And this guy with the MLS team reached out because of that.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I'd actually been following you before. But then when he saw the name, he's like, oh, cool. Yep. And then
the connection's made.
It's one of those things that, like, you can't make up, but that happens a lot more frequently than you might think.
Yeah.
But it's just consistency over time. Like, I'm almost coming up to 1,000 posts.
Wow.
And, like, all of those were thoughtful.
Yeah.
And
intentional. They were intentional.
They were intentional about, like, there was something specific I want to say. Now, of course, like, this was, oh my gosh, I started my junior year in college. simplesportsperformance.blogspot.com. Eric Messi was my inspiration.
Look at that. Let's go.
And it's like, not that those were super high quality, but
sure.
I've been doing this for, oh my gosh, 7+ years.
Wow.
Just to get one person to DM me. From, like, an MLS team.
Yeah.
It's like, was that worth it? Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think social media is so powerful, and if you use it that way, and it's changed not necessarily my career, but having outlets and having an excuse to connect with people and having stuff like that. Now, I would say if anyone plays video games here, I'm a little bit of a sweat at social media. I try hard for sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. Like,
no.
You have good stuff that people like the vibe,
Yeah. Well, it especially doesn't take much when in the field per se, there's not that many that are consistently putting information. And so you can be seen rather quickly, if you will, due to leveraging a free app on your phone or apps on your phone. And with that, you get to do what Matt does and go to these special conferences where it's invite only or it's, X user only, and then your network builds. And then you get to know those people, and then you get to say, let me call them and just see what's going on in their life. And then, it builds from there, right? So there's a lot of benefit to it. I heard something, so simple, so profound. It said you can either be a producer or a consumer. And then it's followed it with producers get paid. I was like, that makes sense. Like, I like that a lot. And so if somebody needs a reason, there you go, right? But let's finish here with the back to the data real fast. What resources or things do you utilize to help you stay on the front of data, to stay on understanding correlations, potential causations, understanding systems, right? And things to say, I have this data. I don't know what I want to do with it yet, but we're going to run it through. Excel is cool, but when we're talking data visualization and we're talking all this other stuff, it gets messy fast and it doesn't look the way we want it to look, right? What do you kind of use? What have you used? What have you learned to say, when I'm analyzing data as a sports scientist, this is kind of my flow, my process?
Yeah, so I think the first way to stay on top of all of the data stuff is to actually be coaching and like have those real life questions as we go back to science, right?
Yeah.
And to tie this back to social media is like, well, if you're actually coaching, you can take one video of your coaching day every day, and it's very simple, and that's how you show you're a real coach. But
yes,
so I'd say to actually be coaching and in the weeds, and I think if I just did sports science, it'd be a lot harder.
Sure.
To do good sports science or to do sports science well. So I'd say is to know what to analyze. Well, you have to have your question first, which goes back to one of our previous conversations. But you have to have that question, and whether that's me coaching, whether that's staff meetings, whether that's whatever, whether that's following, people that do what I want to do, like JB Marin,
yep.
Or stuff like that. Reading those studies and then reading what tests they use and stuff like that. But then like the big kind of 4 tests is like correlation, t-test, ANOVA, and regressions.
Yep.
I use Jamovi.
Okay.
I don't know, Jamovi.
Okay.
I did SPSS in grad school, but I think you need the subscription.
Yeah, I think you do too.
But those are the main 4 tests. And then I'm kind of going down this smallest detectable change rabbit hole. If we want to say that our athletes are getting better, well, what is better, right? So smallest detectable change is basically with the typical error or the measurement error plus the variability in output. There's going to be this little bandwidth that you can't say is really improvement based on the tech and the athlete.
Sure.
So with our 1080 numbers of this most recent combine season, we did V0, was it time? No, velocity at 15 yards and a few other numbers, and saying it's like what is actually better, basically a standard deviation of improvement, basically.
Okay.
And then I go to ChatGPT, and then I'm like, hey, how do I do this? Here's my data, stuff like that. And then now I have too many data points, but I'm trying to do that for fly 10s for different age groups, And it's like one of those questions where it's like, well, yes, it just has to get better, But if you want to have that conversation with a parent, or if you just want to reaffirm to an athlete, hey, you actually are getting better. Oh, it seems like a small improvement, but it actually is an improvement, So it's a combination of having real life anecdotes and questions, and then also just not getting too complicated and fancy. Admittedly, doing a thesis that's published in JSCR, super cool that it turned out like that. I know the extreme end of data collection and analysis.
Mm.
So what's the truth? And then where's this real life anecdote I have to coach, I have to make a good session and workout? Then kind of how do I meet it in the middle of
Sure.
storing data better, collecting it better? How do I describe it to my co-coaches better so they collect good data and whatnot? I actually had this question / conversation with another coach at the D1 level, and I was asking him about stats and stuff like that. That's something that I feel I'm a little weaker in. And he honestly said he's like, there's not that much time for all that stuff, and like, is the juice worth the squeeze? So, like you can do a lot of stuff with correlation, regression, t-tests, and ANOVAs.
Yeah.
Like with the t-tests, I did, are athletes faster when they race, statistically or not, and what percent faster are they? Regressions is like load velocity profiling. ANOVAs would be like multiple t-tests, and then what was the last one? Whatever. Anyways, and then you have things like small detectable change, but that was based on, I read that in the CPSS textbook, the certification, but then I also had real life data. Like the best I got at Excel was when my boss left a month before beach volleyball season started.
Yeah.
And I had to, right?
You had to.
And I admittedly have as many half-done Coursera's on coding as any other sports science strength coach guy or gal. But you just need real data and real questions, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So making that come to life is like question / anecdote. My boss is the yin to my yang. He'll have this little offhand comment. I'm like, oh, wait, I want to know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
I'm down this rabbit hole for like the next 2 weeks. But because I had the data stored in a good way, because I did my thesis, then it's easy to pull and kind of do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully that kind of thought process and flow makes sense.
Well, and I think the central thing too, so, everybody will kind of say, if we're not making decisions with data, it'll go back to is the juice worth the squeeze? And so it's now coming to say, when we look at this data and we find a correlation, a statistical correlation, or a small detectable change or not, those questions then should be leading us to decisions via training, via practice, via, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's a question of like, if you're putting everything together, right? Maybe it's the decision of like, we need to get our athletes more sleep. That is what is potentially our limiting factor, our rate limiting factor. It's not just in the physical realm, but like maybe that's what it is. Maybe we need to get our athletes more nutrition or better nutrition. And because of that, we could see whatever, right? And so you have to have the data and the statistical correlations and all of that. I think is fantastic. And it leads us to the decision point, right? And, if I'm looking at it from a collegiate perspective, that information is the information you bring and put together to the table and say, hey, coach, here's why we need X. Here's why we need more funds. Here's why we should implement a nutrition center. Here's why we should implement education on sleep, or bring in a sleep specialist, or bring in a gut health specialist, or bring in whatever. Because again, back to what we said, you have the objective data to then say, based upon literally everything that we have, this is what it shows. Or we need to cut back on practice, or I will cut back on the weight room, or whatever the case may be. It's just taking that to then lead to decisions. And it's not just one decision, it's a multitude of decisions, obviously, but just goes back to programming. Change one thing and test and retest, right? Like, it's the same concept. It's the same discovery process, if you will, but it's just in a different light. And so, you're going to spend time, but your data then derives a decision. And it could be a small decision, or it could be a large scale decision, a micro and a macro. But, that's where the juice is worth the squeeze, if that makes sense. And a lot of times, to your point, like earlier, you may not see that benefit for a year later,
right? Because you might have to be in that specific context again to say, based off the decision that we made this year, we saw the positive benefits the following year, which is what you would do in a business anyways, right? Like when you implement a change, it may not happen that next day. It may have to be an entire business cycle, an entire season, right, of off season and back into the in season to then say, hey, remember when we made that decision a year ago? This is where we're at today. This is the positive change we're looking for. And it's having that patience, it's having that understanding, but you can also share that with them if you're presenting, if you're informing your coaches and educating with them that we may make the decision today, but we may not know the results a year from now. And are we okay with that? It's just being open and honest, but it's having that process, it's having those conversations, it's having that understanding. Some decisions you'll see the results the following day, the following week, the following month. Some may not, but it's just knowing and understanding that, and then coming back on that and closing that loop. That I think a lot of people may struggle with or may not understand completely.
To put a 3-step, people like concise, simple, whatever.
Yes.
Data discussions, decisions, and as you said, like bring XYZ to the table. You bring your data to the table to discuss, and that's one thing that I like about Whoop, as I used to help the women's tennis team at TCU, is like you can change it to on game days, no one can see anything, right? Are you going to take your top girl off the ones court if she's red on that day? Probably not, So it's like, just how do we open up that discussion? And that's where it's like, where like the head sport coach, well, there's a reason they're getting paid to do that, right? They know that you have to push during this point in the season, or okay, maybe we should pull back or whatever. But it just opens up that conversation, and then you can have the perspectives of this expert in the sport and the expert in the numbers and the expert in kind of load monitoring in that realm, would also kind of be the strength coach and whatnot. But going back to the consulting, where it's like they might not want it until they think it's a problem.
Yeah.
But to be ready, and to be like, okay, perfect. Like it might go in one ear, out the other until they want to hear it, which sucks. And that's where it's like, it might not pay off for like a year, So yeah,
Or like to that point, like sometimes coaches, and I love all of them, but they need to see another university doing it. Sometimes they're just a little hesitant to potentially be the first ones doing that at a university setting. Same thing in a business, right? In a private sector, if you're like, hey, let's do this. The owner could be a little hesitant until he starts seeing other people doing it, right? It's that social proof. It's that social concept. It's that social, like, is somebody else doing it? And if so, cool, right? Because maybe sometimes that's what it takes, right? Like, you'll hear the conversation. Well, so-and-so is doing that. Should we do that? It's like, yep. We talked about that last year, but it's just having that. And so it's not throwing it in their face. So don't take it that way if you're listening, but it's just having that conversation and knowing and understanding that could be the hesitancy. And that's okay. You just have to learn to overcome that,
Yeah, for sure. Spot on.
Yeah, it's tough, but Matt, I want to thank you for today. I think there is a lot of information that can help other coaches from a sports science standpoint, from a consultant standpoint, how to make more money standpoint, and how to kind of separate yourself from the marketplace and to, be okay failing. That's the best part. And so I want to thank you, acknowledge for what you're doing. I'm super excited for what you're continuing to do, what you guys have going on there in the private sector, and then what you're doing as well. So thank you. Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you and everything you've done.
Fantastic, Coach. Thank you for the opportunity, for the thoughtful questions and discussions. Hopefully I was able to not talk anyone to too much sleepiness. But even if it's a nugget or two or a different mindset shift, hopefully there was some value to be extracted from our convo.
Absolutely. And where can they find you? You have your own podcast. You are on social. Where can they find you on social? Where can they listen to you? And how can they get in contact with you?
For sure. So Instagram and Twitter, Coach Big Toe. So Coach BIGTOE.
Yeah.
It's a play on my last name.
Okay.
And then my links to all of that stuff is in there as well. Probably Instagram is better. Fun fact: all of the coaches that I've reached out about consulting with on IG and Twitter, I've gotten no responses on Twitter and like all of it on IG. It's probably just better DMing on there. So just shoot me a message on IG. Link to my podcast, my YouTube, and everything is on there.
Awesome. The thing on Twitter, I hate their messaging platform because you'll see the notification once and maybe you won't look at it at that point in time. And it goes away. And then you're like, dude, I totally forgot about it because when I go on, I don't have the notification. I hate the Twitter messaging platform. Elon, if you're listening, fix it, bro. Yeah, man. Come on. But hey, I want to appreciate you guys. Hey, if you guys are still listening, I know you are because this is a great episode. Guys, share this with a friend. If you're like, dude, I need a sports scientist. We need to get something going on with what we're doing here because we just don't have the means. We don't have the people. We don't have the time. Reach out to Matt. Okay, he's obviously more than welcome and willing to do it. Reach out to them, have that conversation, start that process. Again, share this with a friend that you think will get value from this. And then if you're on YouTube, hit us up, hit the subscribe button super fast. We're growing there. And then leave us a comment. So appreciate you guys listening and appreciate you guys continuing to support us. We're growing exponentially, both on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And it's great to bring on guests like this that continue to provide you with actionable information that you can take and go and apply to not only help you with your coaching, your sports science stuff, but to help you make more money as well. And I think that's a lot of what everybody's after as well. So, Matt, thank you, guys. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Look forward to it.